Okay. uh, Movie review time. The movie was Best of Enemies, which is the story of William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal's 1968 debates. Yeah, it's a documentary. So, reason I saw this, I never heard of this movie until a coworker recommended it to me several months ago now. And it was, it was one of these kind of quite strong recommendations. We're like, oh, this is a really good movie. You got to see this if you can. And it was by somebody whose opinions I respect. Like somebody who usually, when he recommends me something, it turns out to be pretty good. And I'm an easy sell on this kind of thing. I like history. I like debates. Been interested in actually both Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley, and I kind of vaguely knew. I mean, I'd seen on YouTube the clips of some of their debates from 1968, so I kind of knew the story a little bit. But the fact that there's a whole new documentary about it, I'm an easy sell on these kind of things, anyways. Wasn't able to track down the movie until just tonight. In Vietnam, I couldn't find it. Now that I'm back in America, visiting my parents, I watched it on their Netflix account, so I was able to find it on Netflix. And it's just a really good documentary. Now, again, I'm the type of person who's an easy sell for this, but... So, like, of course, not everyone's going to like this. If you're not interested in history or politics or news shows or something like that, you're not going to be interested in this. But if you're a bit of a nerd and you're into this type of stuff, it's just a fascinating documentary. Yeah, from many different angles. It's just really interesting. It's amazing, really, because these debates took place in 1968, which is almost 50 years ago exactly. I'm recording this in 2017, so, 49 years ago. But, boy, it is amazing how little has changed in these 50 years. Especially, I think there's a tendency of everyone to regard anything that happened before they were born as ancient history. I know I do this. So even though 1968 was only 10 years before I was born, and 10 years is really nothing, right? But it's just all part of the mystical past. Anything that happened before you were born is kind of beyond your comprehension. And you kind of expect things to be different. This was just like this mystical time where people listened to strange music and watched strange things on TV. So that's the image you have of the past. But you watch these clips of these debates and you're like, wow, that could have been yesterday. From a number of levels. First of all, the way Buckley and Gore debate... They don't really debate the issues at all. They start out nominally on the issues, and then they take this, they characterize the other view, like Gore Vidal characterizes all Republicans as kind of like greedy and stuff like that, and Buckley characterizes all the Democrats. Actually, Buckley doesn't do it quite as much in the videos, but he characterizes a little bit. So they're not really debating the issues. They make a caricature of the opposing party, and then they attack that caricature, and then they go right into the personal attacks on the other person. Well, of course you would say that, Buckley, because you're exactly that kind of warmonger who would, it's so, and you're like, wow, this is like cable news today. The way they're not really debating the issues at all. They're just trading caricatures and making personal attacks on each other. This was 50 years ago, but boy, you're like, boy, this is TV today. It's just so weird how nothing has changed over the past 50 years. Now, the movie makes the case. Some of it is stated directly, some of it is implied, that these Gore-Vidal-William Buckley debates were the start of this whole trend. So they're implying very heavily that the reason that cable news shows today is all just kind of talking heads just attacking each other is a direct legacy from these 1968 debates between Gore-Vidal and William Buckley. I don't know. Somebody who knows... There are probably very few people who are well versed enough in the history of news shows to actually, or the history of kind of televised journalism to actually know this question. I'm not sure if that thesis is accurate. I got the impression watching it that, boy, just nothing has changed. The movie is making the thesis that this was a change. This Gore-Vidal debate was a watershed moment that kind of changed how politics is, political debate has changed on television ever since then. Whether this was the change or whether this is just one of those examples of like how nothing ever changes, I don't know. But certainly like you get the impression watching these videos, you're like, oh wow, like this could be on TV today. I mean, like this style of debating. The other thing is the talking points have not changed in 50 years. The attacks that Gore-Vidal makes on the Republican Party are the exact same talking points that any leftist will make against the Republican Party today, or any Democratic operative. The points that William F. Buckley has about conservatism, or his counterattacks, are the exact same talking points that the Republican Party has today. So, we've just been through an election this past year, and I'm watching this documentary and I'm like, these are all the exact same talking points we just heard this past year. And they were saying them 50 years ago. And you're like, wow, so little has changed. And even one of the things, and this documentary came out in 2015, I think it was released. So like before like this whole Trump thing. But even the tendency of so I want to be careful of how I phrase this, but I guess the association between the Republican Party and Nazism, it existed all the way back in the 1960s. They apparently was an issue in the 1964 campaign with Goldwater, and then it's something Gore-Vidal goes on with the attack with in 1968 during their debates. So this is something that came up, of course, with Trump, and how, it's difficult to know what to make of this, really, because the fact that this line of attack has been around since 1964, with liberals accusing the Republican Party of being Nazis, in one sense indicates maybe the Chicken Little syndrome, huh? Like if the Republican Party, if we're always accusing the Republican Party of being Nazis, then maybe that's just a sign that this is kind of an empty, that there's nothing really there, that it's an empty kind of alarm bell. Metaphor doesn't make sense, but on the other hand, I guess I'm going to reveal my political biases here, but I did think there was legitimate cause to be alarmed this past election. Not saying maybe that Trump was a Nazi, but saying that people who were Nazis were very vocally supporting Trump, and people who were racists were very vocally supporting Trump. Not saying that everyone supporting Trump was a racist, but saying the people who were racists were very out in the open supporting Trump. So that to me, I think there was legitimate cause for alarm. And yet, it's funny to watch this video and see that 50 years ago, people were saying Barry Goldwater was legitimate cause for alarm to worry about the Nazis, or 1968. Like you wonder, like, is this one of these things? Has this just kind of cycled back around again, and we're at the same point we were 50 years ago? Or is this just like the way things always are? Like, if you could pick any point in American history, we're always kind of having this debate between left and right. I think, I don't know, probably a little bit of column A, probably a little bit of column B. I think the rhetoric during the Reagan years, which I was kind of too young to really pay attention to at the time, but I've gone back and kind of read some of that stuff or listened to some of those old clips on YouTube. It was the exact same debate we're having now. It was the exact same debate they were having in 1968. I mean, no Vietnam War now, but you substitute in any other imperial, any other kind of war, or any other kind of U.S. Army being involved somewhere for the Vietnam War, and it's more or less the same debate. I've gotten completely off topic here, and I'm talking in circles. The point is the documentary. And I just thought it was fascinating. I thought all these parallels, all these clips, and showing all these parallels. The movie didn't even have to say, the documentary didn't even have to say it was a parallel. The parallels just jumped right out at you. And then the story of Gore Vidal and Buckley. I knew the story of Gore Vidal a bit. I knew he was connected to the Kennedys somehow, and I knew he had some sort of political ambitions, but all of this has been kind of in the back of my mind. It was interesting to see that story again. I didn't realize apparently Jackie Kennedy was his stepsister, and he had... The movie says, and the people in the documentary even say this seems ridiculous now in retrospect, but apparently Gore Vidal had ambitions to be president. He ran for the Senate in 1960, thought this was a stepping stone onto the presidency, and thought Bobby Kennedy was his potential rival to be president in the future. I don't know if the movie was exaggerating that or not. I mean, it does seem ridiculous that Gore Vidal, Gore Vidal, for all his faults, was very brave, and the movie makes this point, the documentary makes this point, was very brave all the way in 1948 of kind of saying there's nothing wrong with homosexuality, which is something that we've only just gotten to now. I mean, even back in the 80s and 90s, that would have been very controversial to say. Maybe it would have been more controversial in the 80s than it was back in Gore Vidal's time. I mean, Gore Vidal was alive in the 80s, but back in 1948, because I think there was religious right backlash during the 80s. I don't know. Anyways, the point is, somebody who was that kind of at the forefront of embracing sexual attitudes, you think, well, they never have a chance of being president. So the whole thing kind of gets ridiculous. But I don't know. Apparently Gore Vidal thought he could be president in 1960. And that's one of the reasons he clashed with Bobby Kennedy, is he saw Bobby Kennedy as a potential rival. The point is, all these interesting little historical details are in the documentary. And details about William F. Buckley, and I think he ran for governor of New York. 64 was in the movie, in the documentary. So point being, you get all these interesting biographical details about Buckley and Gore Vidal, and it extends kind of how these debates kind of overshadowed their later lives as well, and stuff like that. My only complaint, and it's a small one, is I wanted more documentary footage. I wanted to see more of the debates than they were showing me. So I wanted more, but I was pleased with what I got. It was interesting. And if you're enough of a geek to be interested in this kind of stuff, you'll love this documentary. I'm a geek. So full 10 out of 10 stars for me. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, really interesting. Yeah, and if you are of likewise temperament, check this out. It's fascinating.